Hello, my name is Nadia Field-Lefer. I'm a composer currently studying for an MA at Cardiff University. We are looking at the clavichord, which my husband built 35 years ago from a kit designed by John Barnes. I'm going to show you how it is creating the sounds, its working components, and as a composer, I would like to highlight by whom over the past 500 years the clavichord was particularly prized and why. But before I do that, why don't I play you the first movement from a Mozart sonatina in C? This clavichord sits on a stand of its own, but most clavichords would not have had stands, and you could simply pick them up and put on any tabletop and they were ready for you to play. This clavichord has two strings per note, and if I show you this key, you can see how it works. It is a simple seesaw mechanism rocking on what is called the balance rail. This brass bit is called the tangent, and it is the tangent which simultaneously brings the string into vibration as well as creating the pitch of the note. The distance between the tangent and the bridge creates the frequency of the note and turns physics into music. It is then a very simple mechanism. Responsive to touch, you can play loud and soft. Unlike on the harpsichord or organ. At this end, we have the bridge, and the bridge is responsible for transmitting the vibrations of the strings to the soundboard, which is made out of a thin piece of spruce. This fret-felt band weaving up and down between the strings is called the listing cloth. It is dampening the sound to the left of the tangent, ensuring that not both sides to the tangents are set into vibration. When I stop the note, the listing cloth dampens the whole of the string and therefore stops the sounding of the note. This clavichord is double fretted. Double fretted means that for some of the notes, two neighboring keys will play their notes on the same pair of strings. Very early on, there were even triple and quadruple fretted clavichords where 3 or 4 notes shared the same pair of strings. Because of this string sharing, fretted clavichords have fewer strings than notes or keys. The tangents of fretted pairs have to be separated by the correct distance to form a semitone. This distance increases as you go down the keyboard. If you look at 2 fretted notes up here, the distance of the semitone is perhaps a quarter of an inch, whilst down here, going from the E to the D sharp, it is almost 2 inches. This causes an interesting problem. How can an instrument designer minimize the amount of cranking in the key shanks whilst maintaining the correct distance between the fretted tangents? Playing on a fretted keyboard means that if I don't let go of this F sharp when I play the F underneath, the F will sound like the F sharp. This is the correct way. So why would anyone go to the trouble of building an instrument which is trickier to make and play rather than build an unfretted instrument? It turns out that fretted clavichords have considerable advantages over non-fretted ones. A problem well known to clavichord owners is that because of the immense string tension, over time they often end up with rounded barrel-like floors rather than their intended flat bottom. The keys then fold in on each other and the instrument becomes unplayable. Since fretting reduces the number of strings required, fretted clavichords are less prone to this problem. To counteract this very problem, the clavichord in front of us has an added brace, a diagonal length of pine attached to the baseboard beneath the keys, with the grain of its wood running parallel to the strings. An instrument with fewer strings is far quicker to tune and tends to stay in tune much better because less tension is trying to pull it out of tune again. And with less tension, the soundboard is freer to vibrate, which is perhaps the reason for the sweeter sound quality of a fretted clavichord attested by many. If this clavichord was unfretted, it would need 34 additional strings. That means a lot more tension. To accommodate all these strings, you would require a much deeper instrument. And the key shanks, the key lever, would need to be very much longer to reach the highest of the strings. And it would be very hard to regulate because the tangents would be so far away from the balance rail. So the technical facility gained by not fretting threatens the sweet sound qualities of a good double-fretted clavichord. Fretted clavichords were made by the finest makers such as Haas and Hubert and existed alongside the unfretted instruments because of their practical advantages. Now, I mentioned earlier that playing a clavichord, moreover a fretted clavichord, is somewhat tricky. When I first tried to play something on this instrument, I got a nasty shock. All the years of practicing legato on the piano disappeared in front of me, with the little clavichord only hurtling, chucking and spitting noises back at me, thus. Luckily, Friedrich Conrad Griepenkerl, who was a pupil of Forkel, Bach's first biographer, has advice on how to tame it. Griepenkerl edited Bach's Chromatic Fantasy and Fugue in 1819, and in the preface he describes the clavichord touch such as possessed by Bach himself, his sons, and pupils. He says, when we are closing our hands, wanting to grasp or grip something, we will naturally bend all our fingers with the thumb towards the inside of the hand. In contrary, just throwing a finger onto a keyboard without the simultaneous bending of it seems unnatural. My own thoughts on this are that by closing the finger with each stroke, you have a secure base for maintaining the downward pressure as needed. The attack of the note happens super fast and there is no unwanted lingering as when you apply weight for finger legato, transferring the weight from finger to finger on the piano. This on the clavichord prevents the next finger from successfully playing its note in turn, and very unlike playing a note on the piano, one stays in touch with the string of the clavichord after the initial stroke. Thus, the key can even be pressed down a little more and you get a rising of the note. Maybe you can hear it. So I play the A and then press a bit more so it goes up. I do it again. Perhaps useful for certain leading notes, or you can attempt a clavichord vibrato called Bebung, although I must say, whilst it is possible, it is not really practical other than on single long notes occurring perhaps in a recitative. Thus. And it seems strange to me that as soon as you mention clavichord, everyone immediately mentions Bebung, rather than its truly ingenious trait that you can play loud and soft by commanding your fingers. Clavichords were relatively cheap, easily affordable by the middle classes of the period all over Europe. They were mostly built by organists and organ builders who used them for practicing and also to teach children keyboard skills. They found usage in church services, monks and nuns used them in monasteries to aid their singing, and we also have records from the 15th and early 16th century of English and Scottish kings owning and playing them. One such document, a letter from the secretary of King Henry VIII to Cardinal Wolsey, reads, "The king has bow good pastime by the new player upon the clavichords that Monsieur Rochepot has brought with him." Johann Nicolaus Forkel attests that J.S. Bach considered the clavichord the best instrument for study and in general for private musical entertainment, and that it lent itself well to express his innermost feelings because of the achievable variety in the tone graduations. There is a lovely story handed down to us about the boy Handel in Halle, who was greatly attracted to music. His father, a barber surgeon, tried to cure him of this attraction and carefully kept all instruments out of his reach. The boy, however, managed to get hold of a clavichord, and in the night, when supposed to be asleep, he practiced his first love, which later brought pleasure to so many people. There is an Italian clavichord from Modena in Maidstone Museum which bears a label saying that Handel used it in composition when traveling. Joseph Haydn told his biographer that as a young man, sitting at my old worm-eaten clavichord, I did not envy any king his luck. One of his clavichords also ended up in England, passing through various hands until it was finally bequeathed to the Royal College of Music in London. When Haydn moved away from the palace of Esterhazy in Eisenstadt to Vienna, he gave his clavichord to a friend, a certain Herr Lichtenthal, with whom Haydn had lived. Here, I make you a present of this instrument for your boy in case when he is older he should care to learn upon it. I have composed the greater part of my creation upon it. In 1763, Leopold Mozart, whilst touring Europe with his wife and children for 3 years, bought a good little travelling clavichord from Stein in Augsburg. He mentions that the clavichord will be of good service and come in handy for exercising during the travels. In a letter to Wolfgang, Leopold Mozart speaks highly of another clavichord. The soprano sounds like a violin played softly, and the bass notes are full like trombones. We know that Mozart used the clavichord for composition because Constanze wrote on a label in another clavichord possessed by Wolfgang that during the space of 5 months in 1791, Mozart composed the magic flute, La Clemenza di Tito, the Requiem, and the Masonic cantata on this clavichord. This one resides in Salzburg, Mozart's birthplace. The clavichord reached the heights of its development in the epoch of C.P.E. Bach, the Empfindsamer Stil, in the second half of the 18th century. C.P.E. Bach was famous for his harpsichord and clavichord skills and widely praised for his singing tone and most touching expression. He wrote particular sonatas, especially for the Silbermann clavichord, which has long-held notes, ideal for inserting the famous Bebung. But his music is also full of chromaticisms, perhaps better suited to an unfretted clavichord. With the appearance and growing popularity of the fortepiano, the clavichord rapidly declined, but lived to see a revival at the beginning of the 20th century with pioneers like Arnold Dolmetsch.